We are back at it. Welcome back to another edition of the Pistols Firing Podcast. I'm Carson Cunningham, joined as always by Colby Powell. Colby, I think we're doing this okay. The olds are back at it with the technology, but we're live. It's a bye week. We've got Tulsa next Friday, but we thought instead of just doing our normal podcast this week, we thought we'd go live and answer some live questions as people file in here. We tried to schedule this right after college game day, but we'll get into everything and happy to be joining you here on a Saturday. It's a stress-free weekend, right? With no Oklahoma State football game today.
Yeah, I know. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say this week 3 bye. When the schedule came out, it didn't look great. I don't love a week 3 bye. It's so early in the season. You feel like you're going to need it later in the season as attrition sets in and you start to have some injuries. And boy, we could not have been more wrong about that. I think everyone needed this week 3 bye. The team needed it. The coaches needed it. Take a couple of weeks, figure out whatever happened in Eugene, whatever happened those last 3 quarters against UT Martin, figure all that out. And for the fans, I think just a week to decompress from what we all watched take place at Oregon last Saturday was much needed. So this was, in hindsight, schedule makers. 2 thumbs up from this guy on the week 3 bye because this is a nice, stress-free Saturday, not having to worry about what's going to happen at Boone Pickens Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much turmoil, which we'll get into. So many questions about Mike Gundy's status and Chad Weiberg's status as well. So we have a lot to get into. So it is a good bye week to reset and kind of evaluate what all's going on with the program. We're starting to see people file in here. Wet Blanket, a dedicated YouTube subscriber. We appreciate him being in here. I went on with John Kurtz, who runs Open for Business, which is a Big 12. He has a newsletter. It's also a Big 12 show, kind of a radio slash podcast show that he does. And he's very similar career to me. He worked in local television covering Kansas State, and he witnessed Kansas State fall to 1-3 last night after losing to Arizona. And so he's very similar backgrounds, worked in local television, now has a regular PR job like I do as well. But he's kind of been through this before with the Bill Snyder saga twice. I mean, Bill retired once, they hired Ron Prince, Bill Snyder came back, and they did deal with kind of the awkward retirement. Is he going to retire? All of those questions that were surrounding him way back then. He had gone through that, and I kind of dove pretty deep into how OSU got here. So if people want to go see all my thoughts on that, you can go watch I think I tweeted out the link from John, and appreciate him having me on his show. So I want to pose that question to you, Colby. How did Oklahoma State get here where they're not competitive in the Big 12? They're 16-20 in their last 36 games against FBS competition. They've trailed by 20 or more points in 22 of their last 32 against FBS competition. And they've now suffered back-to-back games against FBS, the 2 worst losses in the Mike Gundy tenure. So in your estimation, I know that's a heavy question, but in your estimation, how did we get here with Oklahoma State?
Yeah, it is. And I didn't get to see your full answer yesterday. I started watching you on with John Kurtz, and then fatherhood called. I had to go parent. The toddler needed me. So, yeah, I watched about 5 minutes of you. You were great on there, and the people love you. I mean, the comments, Carson knows ball. Carson Cunningham's a great get. I mean, before we move on to my thoughts, like, you got to be feeling yourself in these comments. John's people loved you.
Well, that's certainly a nice change to Carson's a Mike Gundy hater, and kids coming after me for tweeting about punting. That's a certainly nice change. You know, most times you don't want to read the comments, but I do appreciate all those nice comments. And when you do shows like that and you're asked to summarize the Mike Gundy era, it's really hard. There's so many moving parts. There's so many factors involved. And I went all the way back to when Mike Gundy was hired. I reminded a lot of people on that show that in 2005, Oklahoma State Stadium was under construction. I didn't leave this part in, but Boone Pickens and Mike Holder handpicked Mike Gundy to be the coach and gave him so many resources. I mentioned this, the money for his assistants, hiring Larry Fedora, who was one of the most established offensive coordinators in the country. They set him up for a lot of success. And so I kind of went that far back into it, but I appreciate you saying that. The comments were very nice. And again, I kind of gave very long answers because there was so much to get to. So I'm curious your thoughts on and you and I talk about this a lot in terms of recruiting, NIL, all those things. But if you were on John's show, what would you say about how OSU got here?
Yeah, I'll give a different answer than what you gave. You talked a lot about the hiring of assistants, and we've talked a lot about that on this show. And you talked about going out to get Yurcich, which ended up working, but that was still a very off the wall. Let's go to Shippensburg, find an OC hire. And you had your last great statue quarterback at Oklahoma State in the Mike Yurcich era, which was Mason Rudolph. And football, a lot of times it comes down to the quarterback, right? So your last great statue quarterback was Mason Rudolph. Before that, you had Brandon Wheaton. Obviously, those guys were not very mobile, but they could absolutely sling it. Mason didn't have the protection that Brandon had. Did a good job with a subpar offensive line, but they were still top 5 in the country yards per play. You showed up to Boone Pickens Stadium and you knew we're going to put on a show. I mean, I remember. You remember, Carson, the Pittsburgh game in 2017 when we did to Pittsburgh what Oregon just did to us? And people are saying, oh, my God, look at Oklahoma State. They're a wagon. Pittsburgh is a garbage program. Look what just happened. And Oklahoma State did that on the road. It was like 49-0 or whatever the score was, 59. I don't remember. Oklahoma State ran away from them early in that game. Bunch of points scored in the first half. And that's what Oklahoma State was, right? That's what Oklahoma State's offense was. 2017 happens, Mason leaves, and now you have to figure out what comes next. You had the Zach Robinson era, you had the Brandon Whedon era. Clint Shelf was a nice little holdover, good player until you got to Mason Rudolph. You had a great era there. The question was, what's next? Okay, you had the Corn Dog year, 6-6. You don't get Spencer in any of his games. You know, it is what it is. There were some moments with Corn Dog, but an obvious drop off there. And then Spencer comes in. And the Spencer era, to me, is one of the hardest to parse at Oklahoma State because the highs were really high. He was a good player, and I think we can see now that his mobility covered up a lot of warts that we've seen develop in this offense over the past half decade, really, maybe even more, maybe going back to right after Mason left. And Spencer covered up a lot of that, but at times the offense still looked anemic with Spencer. And it just seemed like they could do nothing and still couldn't quite get over that big hump. Then you get the best defense in school history in 21. That carries you to a Fiesta Bowl win with Malcolm and Devin Harper and all those guys. And since then, it's just been weird, right? Like you had the 2022 season with Spencer, and it just totally unravels, comes completely undone. The coaches and Spencer are clearly not getting along. Something is wrong there. Something is wrong that is making one of the winningest quarterbacks in school history, who, by the way, had he come back for another season, likely would have become the winningest quarterback in school history. Something happens. There's a disconnect. He leaves, and now you have to figure out what comes next. Somehow, you get Alan Bowman after the 34-7 trio of quarterback situation. Somehow you get Alan Bowman to lead that team to a Big 12 championship game, keep OU from getting there in their last year in the conference. Everybody feels good. I feel good. Carson, do you remember what my mantra was after the 2023 season?
Always believe in Gundy.
Very close. In Gundy, we trust.
In Gundy, we trust. I was thinking of a penny, and I couldn't think of the slogan.
That was my mantra after the 2023 season. In Gundy, we trust. And then last year, something happened. I don't know what happened, but something happened. Alan Bowman got the yips. Casey Dunn, I don't know if he lost the ability to call an offense. I don't know if Gundy got in there too much. They started doing too many different things. But to not get into the exact same weeds you got into of coordinator hires, I would say that Mike Gundy's teams have failed to develop a modern offense. If you want me to point to one thing, it's that a modern offense is not being run in Stillwater. A modern offense was not run in Stillwater in 2023 whenever Alan Bowman took Oklahoma State to the Big 12 championship game either. That just happened to work because he kept throwing fades up the sideline that Rashad Owens kept going and getting. He kept throwing screens out to Brennan Presley, and Brennan Presley was making guys go crazy. Ollie Gordon won the Doak Walker. I don't know what kind of pixie dust Oklahoma State sprinkled on that 2023 season, but those weren't exactly elite concepts either. Carson, I watch a lot of NFL because the talent in the NFL is so evenly matched. You have to out-scheme people in that league. The salary cap dictates that those teams are evenly matched. You get a ton of one-score games every week. I watch a lot of stuff throughout the week about NFL offenses and what they're doing. I was watching something this morning about Matt LaFleur, something he saw on film with the Giants-Commanders game that he then attacked against the Commanders on Thursdays. And what these minds in the NFL are doing offensively, because defenses have caught up to what Oklahoma State did for the first decade that Mike Gundy was in Stillwater. Defenses have caught up. You're seeing more too-high stuff. Teams are really forcing you to be able to run the ball. If you can't protect up front, if you can't push people off the line, which Oklahoma State can't, then defenses are just going to be able to take advantage of you. And Oklahoma State has failed to find a way to coach around that on the offensive side of the ball. So I guess that it goes together with what you're saying about the hiring of assistants, but I think it also goes to Mike Gundy not being willing to let an offensive coordinator run a truly new elite modern offense like what we're seeing in the NFL, like what we're seeing at colleges all across the top 25. I mean, what Will Stein is doing at Oregon, he's going to do that to other teams this year. Maybe not to the extent of what we saw in the first half last week against Oklahoma State, where Oregon had 150 total yards of offense a minute and a half into the game, but he's going to do more of that to people this year. Todd Monken, Oklahoma State's former offensive coordinator, doing it with Lamar Jackson. I think it's been the inability to evolve the offense as defenses have caught up.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way into stating how we got here. I think first and foremost, the football is how we got here. I think you make a valid point about the offense because let's face it, you and I have talked a lot about this. Oklahoma State, to compete at the national level, has to do it with offense, with spread offenses. So many high schools are running that now. With the personnel they get, they're not just going to line up and run pro-style offense and blow people off the ball and just run better routes. That's never going to happen. And they're not going to have a defense like I don't know if 2021 is ever going to happen again. It certainly could, I guess, but they kind of caught lightning in a bottle with fifth and sixth year players that were grown men. Certainly not with the continuity now that exists in NIL, the lack of continuity. Are they ever going to have a defense that competes nationally? That's just what it's going to be, unless you get a head coach that can recruit to that level on the defensive side. So, yeah, to me, it definitely comes down to he was slow on NIL to react, slow to really get all those ducks in a row. But like I mentioned with John Kurtz, like this has been coming for a while. Like you and I have been labeled Gundy haters because we've been pointing out the slide that's been occurring, not only the bad losses that have happened the last couple of years, but just they get to a Big 12 championship game. And that's where you see the differences in roster talent and recruiting is winning those tight elite level games against elite level competition. Oklahoma State hasn't had enough to get over the top. It's probably why Mike's record in Bedlam is what it is, honestly, as opposed to in his approach in that game certainly goes a long way as well. But no, I do think all of that I just said, and then the fact he started hiring coordinators that he wanted to keep and stay. Yeah, I made this analogy many times on this show too. It reminds me of Tulsa basketball. Tulsa got tired of their head coaches being poached for winning. Bill Self, I can go to Nolan Richardson, on all the way down the list. And they started hiring head coaches that they thought would stay. And what's happened? Tulsa hasn't been relevant in basketball ever since. Not even close. I mean, you had Bill Self going to the Elite Eight. Instead of hiring just the next Bill Self, they hired someone they thought would be loyal to Tulsa. And that's how you get look, Mike Yursich worked out from Shippensburg, but he was not remotely qualified to be the head offensive coordinator of Oklahoma State, certainly not the salary that they paid him right away. Todd Monken was a great hire. They went way back on staffs together. But really just those hires moving forward from Mike Yursich on down the line to Sean Gleason out of Princeton for 1 year, that he did not gel well with that staff. That was a quick exit. And then Casey Dunn, you wanted to keep, which I get. He was one of the best receiver coaches in the country. I did think he deserved a shot at the offensive coordinator, but what happened? He was very late to fire him. He should have fired him after the 2022 season. So I agree. I think the lack of just hiring coaches that are the best possible coordinators you can get and will bring something to the table of their own. That's another factor, Colby. Doug Meacham's running the Mike Gundy offense, is he not?
Yeah, and we talked about this last week. There's nothing new on this offense. It's the same thing we saw a year ago. But just to go back to the coordinator hires point, who's the one that really smashed in the last 10 years? The one that really smashed was Jim Knowles. That's also, I mean, that's the only guy that Mike Gundy's hired from the Power 4 Division I level who was doing the play calling and coordinating at the stop that he was most recently at. Doug Meacham was not doing the play calling and coordinating at the stop that he was most recently at. Todd Grantham was not doing the play calling and coordinating at the stop that he was most recently at. Sean Gleason came from Princeton. right? Brian Nardo came from where'd he get? Gannon.
Gannon.
Shippensburg with Mike Yurcich. Again, it worked. It worked. But he was unqualified to be the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. The one guy who has smashed was the one guy who was a coordinator, was calling plays, was handling his side of the ball at a Power 4 stop before he got here. And that guy was the best defensive coordinator in modern school history, at least. I don't want to speak for the 70s, the 80s. In modern school history, that guy was the biggest smash. And just to step back to something I brought up with Mason being the last statue quarterback at Oklahoma State that worked. Carson, we've known the offensive line's a problem for a decade. For a decade. The one time that was covered up was the one time that you had a mobile quarterback. That was the one time that you were able to hide those deficiencies. I guess 2023 for 2 months. You made it work for 2 months in 2023. That was great job. Still 2023. Don't know how that happened. Tip my cap. I think the unwillingness to exclusively bring in mobile quarterbacks, Carson, if you can't block up front, you don't need to have one Hoss Haney and then go to a statue. You don't need to have one Spencer Sanders and then go to a statue. You need to have 3 mobile quarterbacks in that room. You need to be able to run the same offense when one of those guys goes down. Oklahoma State hasn't done that. We've talked about this for years too. How do we keep winding up with quarterbacks rooms where quarterback 1 and quarterback 2 are totally different players that require totally different schemes, that require totally different blocking, that make things different for the running backs? How do we continue to have quarterback rooms that are just totally mismatched? That is another thing that has really caught up to this program because, yes, we've been unlucky with injuries at that position, but the fact that the main guy gets injured and then the next guy has an entirely different skill set that requires an entirely different offense when we've already discussed and we've already determined that you're not dealing with elite coordinators here, I mean, that's a big, big problem too, what's been happening in the quarterback room 1 through 3, where those guys are just totally mismatched, running different offenses, don't fit. That's a big, big problem.
To the point they're afraid to call the actual plays. I mean, we thought Zane Flores, the play calls they had for him was on the fly, just don't get him hurt before we go to Oregon. Well, it looked the exact same at Oregon, and they're afraid to throw the ball down the field. They're afraid to do anything with their backup quarterback. And that goes to what you're saying is they're very different quarterbacks. And that leads me to the question of, you had 4 on the roster. And look, Zane Flores, I continued to hear it was a close competition with Hoss Haney. You watch the sample size we have with Hoss Haney and Zane Flores, you wonder how that could be. But my bigger question is, why did you prioritize, like, to me, Garrett Rangel and Milo Smith transferred because they knew the pecking order. That those guys stuck it out through spring ball and then decided to transfer because they understood what was going on. Both of those guys are more mobile than Zane Flores. So if you literally can't run your offense with Zane Flores, why did you prioritize him in the pecking order? That is a huge mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah, and
maybe Zane Flores will end up being a really good quarterback, but he simply either you're choosing not to run the offense with him because you don't trust him, or he can't. Both of those scenarios are how we got here.
Yeah, and I'll say again, I think Zane's been set up to fail, but that just goes back to the original point. Offensive line's a problem. The coaches had to have known that it was going to be a problem coming into the season. And behind QB1, Hoss Haney, very mobile, extremely mobile, is Zane Flores. And the offense is non-functional. In 3 quarters against Tennessee Martin, you scored 1 touchdown, and it was on 3rd and goal from the 10. You ran a jet sweep. You didn't even let him sling it because if you knew if he tried to drop back to throw it, UT Martin was going to get there. He wasn't going to have time. And then last week against Oregon, I mean, my God, how would you have felt to have been Zane Flores last week? You take a snap and drop back. I'm telling you, the first Oklahoma State offensive series of that game, the first 3rd down of that game, Zane Flores took the snap, dropped back, and I thought it was a halfback slip screen because everyone got through. Every Oregon pass rusher, I think there were 5 of them that they sent. All 5 got through immediately. How would you like to be Zane Flores in that situation? He's been set up to fail, but as the coaches, you have to know that that's not the kind of offense that your team and your personnel and your coordinator are capable of running. If you can't run that offense, then I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how well he can throw the football. And I think he can throw the football pretty well. We saw a couple of nice throws against UT Martin. The ball pops out of his hand good. It's a tight spiral, got good arm strength. All those things that I'm sure look good in August in shorts without pads on. Those things don't matter when you're in Eugene and you've got 5 guys getting through the line. Those things don't matter. It's just it's a coaching failure to have one mobile quarterback on the roster if this is what you can do with your offense.
Yep, I completely agree with you, and that's a larger issue. And you could also throw in too, like their recruiting at the quarterback position hasn't been good since Spencer Sanders. I mean, Mason Rudolph was an unbelievable recruit and highly ranked. I mean, he was getting offers from SEC caliber programs. Zane Flores also had a lot of high level offers. He hasn't really shown much to this point, but I do empathize with Zane, don't you? I mean, watching that Oregon game, they're not trusting him to throw it further than, I mean, his 2 pick sixes, Colby, are what, 3 yard passes, 4 yard passes? Like they
Yeah.
don't, it's the old adage that Gundy has said publicly of throw it sideways and run the ball. And then you add that it looks the exact same as last year as far as the inside zone runs, like just beating your head against the wall with inside zone. It just nothing's changed from last year. And that was my fear hiring Doug Meacham and Todd Grantham. Yes, they're established coaches with a lot of track record, but as you pointed out, they haven't called plays for 4 years. And Todd Grantham didn't have a job. So he's going to do what he's told. Doug Meacham wasn't calling plays, gets a huge salary. He's going to do what he's told by the head coach. And I think, look, people want to say I'm a Gundy hater. We're just pointing out exactly the issues. My name was thrown out a lot on the Sports Animal this week with the Gavin Gundy deal, where he tweeted at me for, calling out rightfully Bedlam mode that was activated at Oregon, where they just punt on the other side of the field down 13-0 as a 4 touchdown underdog. Well, and my name was thrown out a lot, and Jim Traber was very, very nice. He's been nothing but great to me. I've hosted a show a few times when he's been out over the years, and Jim and I are cordial and we're friendly, but we're not like best friends. So for him to come out and defend me like that and say all those nice things, I thought that was very commendable by Jim. So I wanted to say that publicly. I appreciated that. He didn't have to say all those nice things, but it sure is nice to hear. I've always defended Jim. I mean, he gets a lot of hate. I think that kind of comes, you and I get hate when we're critical of Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy, and that just kind of comes with the territory. But I rue the day that Jim Traber is not hosting his radio show on the Sports Animal, because he says all the things on there about Mike Gundy, some of it right, some of it wrong. You can debate that all day long. But he says the things that really are going on and that frankly other people are afraid to say in terms of that situation. So I'm not sure how I got on that topic, but I didn't want to say that publicly. I appreciate Jim saying the things he said. He was very nice. But
Yeah, I listened to that show. That was good stuff. I don't know Jim personally, but I've been a fan of his show for a long time. Yeah, if you say things publicly, sometimes people are going to have a problem with it. It comes with the territory, but I think
I know why I brought that up. Mark Rogers came on, who I am friends with and friendly with. He said something like, you can just scroll through Carson's Twitter and he's anti-Gundy. He's a Gundy hater. I think he said anti-Gundy, which I just scoff at, because I covered Mike as a student at Oklahoma State at the O'Colly. I don't have to go down my track record of defending Mike Gundy, but I will. I People don't realize after that 2011 season, things were contentious then for his contract. He deserved a big raise, a huge contract for everything he did there, winning the Big 12. And he was pretty cross with Mike Holder at the time, and he was talking to other schools at the time. And I was publicly stating that it's time to pay Mike Gundy if you want to be a big boy in college football. I've called Mike Gundy a Hall of Famer for close to 10 years now. My track record is out there, but when things are going poorly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say everything's great, because to me, that's just disingenuous. And that's not how you do a show. That's not how you discuss things. That people will tune you out if you don't tell it like it is. And so I don't really get too bothered when people call me that. I say check the receipts. Like I'm pretty much on record on this podcast for the last 10 years of everything I've said. It's all on record. And that leads me to the discussion of Mike Gundy. And I was asked by John Kurtz on his show, just what's the way out of this? I said winning. Like Mike Gundy's been in this scenario before. I brought up 2014, the Tyreek Hill punt game. People were reporting, like not just talk, not just rumor. People were reporting Mike Gundy might be fired after that game if he lost, and he won that game. And we all know what happened with Mason Rudolph after that. So winning cures all, Colby. I just, based on what we've seen, you struggle to come up with scenarios in which that'll occur. Now their schedule will get easier after Oregon, starting with Tulsa on in the Big 12, which is not very good, which we can get into in the show. And I see people asking questions. We will get to those. So if you have a question, fire it off in the chat. But that's the only way out of this, right? For Mike's just to suck it up and win games, and then just say, hey, look, I had two new coordinators, a whole new staff, and took some time to gel.
Yeah, winning is the only way out of it. I'll be honest with you. I don't think that this team is good enough. I don't think that this staff is good enough based on what I've seen through 2 weeks of the season. But it's 2 weeks of the season. When the 2023 disaster happened, the South Alabama loss happened. Remember, that was on the heels of the 2022 disaster. So we're really kind of having deja vu right now. We're reliving a disastrous season. Now, 22 was not as disastrous as 24, but we're reliving a disastrous season followed by an awful start to the following year. And they pulled themselves out of it in 23. Now, they pulled themselves out of it in 23 with a bunch of guys who we knew were really good players who had been around the program for years. We knew Brennan Presley was a really good player. We knew Ollie Gordon was a really good player. Rashad Owens ended up being a really good player. The offensive line did enough. Alan Bowman did enough. The defense in year one under Nardo did enough. They pulled themselves out of it. I don't see that happening this year, but the schedule does ease up quite a bit. I do think that they're going to beat Tulsa this next week. Arizona, they beat Kansas State last night. Real quick, Carson, I have it pulled up. Have you looked at the box score for Kansas State last night? Because there are some people in Manhattan doing the same podcast we're doing today.
Yeah, I think John Kurtz was live just a few minutes ago, and it said rock bottom.
Yes.
Like how many times have we had a show where we asked that question?
Oh, here's the box score for Kansas State. Avery Johnson, and this is at Arizona last night, and Kansas State's now 1-3 on the season. Avery Johnson went 13 of 29 for 88 yards in that game. His QBR was 11.8. Kansas State running the ball, Carson, they ran it 24 times for 105 yards. That's an average of 4.4 a carry. Okay, fine enough, right? But their leading rusher was their receiver, who took an end around, 1 carry, 75 yards, and a touchdown. So on their other 23 carries, they ran the ball for 30 yards, which off the top of my head is about 1.3 yards per carry on their other 23 runs that were not the end around to the receiver who took it 75 to the house. So, I mean, yeah, very rock bottomy for Kansas State right now. There's not a lot of great football being played in the Big 12, but there's some good football. Iowa State's playing good football. Baylor is playing good football. Texas Tech, Utah. Like, there are teams in this conference playing good football. It's just not some of the ones that we're used to seeing. Oklahoma State and Kansas State lead amongst them. So, yeah, that was pretty shocking what we saw last night with K-State. The schedule does get easier. I don't know. I mean, winning drags you out of it. Does anybody think Oklahoma State's going to get to 6 wins on the season? I mean, again, maybe Haas is a super healer and he comes back in week 7 and Oklahoma State runs the table to end the season, but it's tougher games at the end of the season. I don't know. I don't see him getting to 6. If they don't get to 6, I don't see how he saves his job, honestly. I mean, the reporting from Bill Haston earlier this week, it's not good. It's not good for Mike Gundy. It's not good that there's reportedly a donor hanging around with an $8 million check, but he's not willing to sign it until Mike Gundy's gone. Like, these are reports from Bill Haston earlier this week in the Tulsa World. Like, this stuff's not good. So, is this team good enough to drag themselves out of the hole that they've already dug 2 weeks into the season? I don't know that they are. So, yeah, winning fixes everything, but I can't see it as we sit here today. I couldn't see it in 23 either, though. So, we can't be too sure, but I can't see it.
It was an 8-figure donor, supposedly, just to clarify. But I did want to say this too. I didn't get into this with John Kurtz. I kind of got into it a little bit, but you know what Gavin Gundy tweeted about, you know, all of Mike Gundy's statistics and factors of why he is a college football Hall of Famer. That's all well and good. The part I take issue with is that like the idea and the opinion that Oklahoma State football wouldn't exist without Mike Gundy simply is not true, first off. And that level of superiority or self-importance to me doesn't recognize Boone Pickens' role in Oklahoma State football. Oklahoma State was literally not trying to win at football for 100 years. And what do I mean by that? Look at all the programs that are considered blue bloods today. They invested money. They built glorious, magnificent stadiums. They pumped tons and tons of money into the program, and that trickles into every aspect of the football program. When Mike Gundy was hired, they were coming off 100 years of not investing in football, playing an old Rust-Oleum Lewis Field stadium, very little financial support whatsoever, very little of an athletic department, frankly. It was amazing they competed at the level they did in other sports without the funding required. So to sit there and say that OSU football just flat out wouldn't be where it is today without Mike Gundy, sure, yes. But solely because of him, I take big issue with, because as I mentioned at the top, the stadium was being built under construction when he was hired. Given they were paying, I would say, in the upper 10% for staffing with Larry Fedora, all the coordinator, all the position coaches. They're paying on the high end of salary to bring in top-notch coaches, and their recruiting was in the top 25 Mike Gundy's first 2 years. Hovered around the 25 to 30 range those first 4, 5, 6 years. Well, now it's gone down to mid 30s, mid 40s. We're now into like the mid 50s and 60s. And that's Mike Gundy. That's not Boone Pickens. And, you know, he could probably argue maybe the funding's not there, whatever. But all that's to say, Mike Gundy would not have had the level of success he had without Boone Pickens and the tremendous amount of support and funding he received when he was announced as the head coach. Full stop. So it's fine to give Mike credit. It's well-deserved credit that Mike deserves wholeheartedly. But to act like Mike Gundy showed up and put OSU on the map and it'll go away without him is just asinine, frankly.
Carson, I think it's unfair to take anything that has happened with the Oklahoma State football program over the last 20 years and assign it to only Mike Gundy or to only Boone Pickens or to only Mike Holder, by the way, because Mike Holder and Boone Pickens, everybody, I think,
yeah, Boone wouldn't have done it without Mike. You're right. It's a great point.
Mike Holder's a big part of all this, too. They all get credit. They all get credit. We shouldn't try to take away credit from any of the three of them. Boone gets credit for being the guy financing it all. Mike Holder gets credit for being the guy making all of that happen. Mike Gundy gets credit for being the guy who day to day for 20 years got in that building and made moves that made Oklahoma State relevant nationally, that made Oklahoma State a player. Oklahoma State, I think Oklahoma State had a good, let's say 2007 through 2023. I mean, what is that, 17 seasons? And there were some down years in there, but that's sustained success for 17 seasons. Mike Gundy was the head coach who oversaw that. Mike Gundy was pulling the strings on all of that. Mike Gundy gets credit for that. Boone Pickens gets credit for the financing of that program. Mike Holder gets credit for making it happen. They all get credit. We don't have to take credit away from Boone Pickens to give it all to Mike Gundy. We don't have to take credit away from Mike Gundy to give it all to Boone Pickens. It's a symbiotic relationship. None of them have the level of success that they had. Oklahoma State football doesn't have the level of success that it had without all three of them doing everything that all three of them have done over the last 20 years. And I understand that, look, all good things come to an end, and they don't always come to an end gracefully. Well, I mean, Bill Belichick, with as recently as a week ago, is fighting in the media with the New England Patriots about who's allowed in whose facility. Good things don't always come to an end with a nice, pretty bow on them. That's not always how it works. It's not always Bob Stoops going on the field firing up the crowd the following season after he turns the program over. Sometimes it's Bill Belichick saying, you know, there's only 32 of those jobs in the world, but I'm not going to let one of them come scout my kids. I don't want that to be the case at Oklahoma State. I don't want this to end sour and bitter. And look, Mike Gundy, he has his responsibilities for how people feel now as well, for the way that he has acted toward the fan base over the past couple of the seasons, for some of the things that he's gotten in front of microphones and said. But I don't know, Carson. I definitely think that this is coming to an end after this season. I would be pretty surprised personally. That's just my opinion. I'm not reporting anything like Bill Haston. He's got sources. I'm just giving my opinion. I think this is the last season of Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State, and I hope that he allows it to end gracefully. I hope the fan base allows it to end gracefully. I hope that it doesn't turn into Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick, where we hate each other for the next 10 years before people can look back and realize how great all this was. Because, yes, Mike's been great. Boone was great. Holder was great. It was all great for Oklahoma State football. They all deserve credit. No one should take any of all of it. No one should downgrade, as Mike Gundy would say. No one should downgrade any of the others for what they've meant to it. They're all important, and I hope that it can have a nice, happy ending for everyone. I think Mike is partially responsible for that. The fans are partially responsible for that. And I think how the next few months play out is going to determine whether this can be a nice, happy ending, name the field, build the statue, or if this is going to be Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick.
Well, do you remember that they put in Mike Gundy's new contract after last spring that he gets to like have say in the successor? Do you remember that?
That's in the new contract?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's okay.
Now,
Yeah.
what that language technically is, I don't know. That could have been, just for the press release, and maybe there's fine print in there. I'm not sure, but
Well, but also if they negotiate a buyout, then I'm sure those things will be talked about. Everything in there will be talked about if a buyout is negotiated.
well, and I bring that up to what you're saying is you hope this ends gracefully. I think that could be part of this ending gracefully. If Mike decides this, if they come to an agreement where Mike Gundy retires and he agrees to a buyout, whether that's a lesser version or full, I don't know. I would hope it would be lesser based on how much money he's made as the head coach. But this could be a launching pad for the next coach. If Gundy comes out publicly, says I'm retiring, and endorses, if they have the replacement in line already, endorses that coach. I mean,
Zach Robinson.
we can talk about Zach in here in a second, but let's just throw out an example of Zach Robinson. Like, hey, there's my former quarterback. Zach's going to crush it. I'm handing off the baton. I'm going to stick around and be in Stillwater and help as much as I can. All those. There's a really great way to end the Mike Gundy era right there at his fingertips if he chooses to do so. I hope that's what happens. It might not be that level of the orange carpet, so to speak, being rolled out, but that's my hope too, that you unveil Mike Gundy Field at the press conference saying I'm retiring, and oh, by the way, here's Zach. Zach, come take the mic. Something like that. If it's not Zach, if it's the next coach, hey, Coach X, come take the mic, and I'm thrilled to leave Oklahoma State with everything I've done and everything I've built.
You want to hear a fun coincidence? Here's a fun coincidence for you. Mike Gundy's last season at Oklahoma State as the quarterback, 1989. Takes over the program in 2005. Zach Robinson's last season as quarterback of Oklahoma State, 2009. It is currently 2025. So I guess he would be his first coaching season would be in 2026. But almost the exact same age, almost the exact same distance removed from being the quarterback at Oklahoma State as when Mike Gundy took over the program. Yeah, sign me up. Sign me up. And yes, I think that would be the easiest situation for Mike Gundy to publicly endorse and fully get behind a successor, is if he's able to come to the realization that Oklahoma State football is no longer better off with him at the helm. And I think that's going to be a hard realization to come to, and I get it, because for the better part of 20 years, Oklahoma State football has been much better off with Mike Gundy at the helm. But if he comes to the realization that it no longer is, that's easily the best way for him to feel good about endorsing someone, is if it's his former quarterback, it's a young guy. I think it would be harder for him to endorse somebody like Monken, somebody like that, somebody who was on his staff, left him, went off, and has had great success elsewhere. And now it's like, gosh, this guy's the same age as me, and I'm having to step aside because I can't get the program where it needs to be, and I'm having to turn it over to one of my former coaches who's my age because everybody thinks he can do it better. I think that would sting a little bit, but I think turning it over to Zach would be kind of a natural a natural succession, if you will, and would be easier for Mike Gundy. So, but again, I think a lot of this hinges on whether Mike Gundy comes to the realization, whether Mike Gundy agrees with our opinions, by the way, not facts, our opinions, that the program would be better off if he turned it over.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. We'll see. Maybe, I mean, just Gundy in general, though. Don't you think he's probably tired himself of NIL? Like I know he's bought in because he had to buy in. That's the world he coaches in now. Don't you think a big part of him, like a Bob Stoops, who got tired of recruiting and dealing with all those things, don't you think Mike's probably tired of dealing with this NIL era and just the way he has to build a program now versus how he had so much success prior?
Yeah, I think that this version of college football, I mean, Mike Gundy, what year was it when he went to the mic and started talking about? I mean, I guess you can go all the way back to 2007 if you want to go to the I'm 40 rant where he says, where are we at in society today? But that was more of just an angry rant about one thing. He maybe 2018, maybe it was the corn dog year where he started talking about, the kids these days being snowflakes and they're soft and you can't coach them. I mean, that was 7 years ago. Look how much things have changed since then. Like, I really have to imagine that Mike Gundy, the way he liked to coach, the type of kid that he liked to bring in, like, I mean, does that work in 2025? It certainly hasn't. It certainly didn't work last year. It certainly didn't work in Eugene last Saturday. I don't know that type of kid, I don't know that style of coaching, I don't know that exists as much anymore. And I do think that it's got to be hard for Mike Gundy to have had so much success one way, building guys up 4 or 5 years and having great teams on the backs of building a team. And now it's like, no, no, no. And I talked about this a couple of years ago. Mike Gundy, he liked to put his teams in the oven at 400 degrees, slow cook those teams for 4 years. Everybody else is out here trying to microwave them. This was my point. When OSU was better than Texas for 15 straight years, that was the point I kept making. Maybe not 15, 10 straight years, Oklahoma State was better than Texas. I'm like, they keep trying to microwave a team. Mike Gundy, he's slow cooking his. And now everybody, you have to microwave your team. The rules have changed. The rug has been pulled out from under Mike Gundy. And yeah, I imagine that's very frustrating that through no fault of his own, he can no longer build a roster. He can no longer coach. He can no longer do things the way that he did them when he was successful. But the reality is, as fans, as people covering the program, as donors, like, yeah, through no fault of his own, the game has changed. But through no fault of his own, he's got to step aside and let somebody else come in and do it under the parameters that have been laid out. So it's just, I know this is like just about the lamest thing ever to say, but it just kind of is what it is. It is what it is, Mike. The game's changed, and we all kind of feel like it's time for somebody else.
Yeah, I agree. And I did want to make one more point about Mike Gundy's career and before let's talk Zach next. But I do want to make this point too, just to wrap up, the notion that Oklahoma State football would not exist without Mike Gundy. Mike Gundy might not exist as the successful head coach without Oklahoma State because people don't really remember his career trajectory when Mike Holder and the powers that be added him to the staff of Les Miles. People don't remember they hired Dirk Cutter. He took the job from Boise State.
What a
I
name.
think he may even had a press conference, or he may have been flying to the press conference and then backed out and went to Arizona State and ended up hiring Les Miles, which worked out great. Worked out great for Mike Gundy because he was an assistant under Pat Jones, his coach at Oklahoma State. He goes to Baylor in 1996, passing game coordinator and quarterback coach. 1 year there, goes to Maryland from 1997 through 1999 as wide receivers coach. In 2000, he was Maryland's passing game coordinator and quarterback coach. Not a great trajectory to get a head coaching job at a Big 12 school based on that resume. Gets hired at Oklahoma State in 2001, becomes the offense coordinator for Les Miles. So those connections to Oklahoma State and the powers that be that were hiring Les Miles, and then the powers that be being Mike Holder and Boone Pickens, hand-picking him to be the next coach when Les Miles left, he vaulted up 10 rungs of the coaching ladder. I mean, the passing game coordinator / quarterback coach at Maryland isn't getting the head coaching job at Oklahoma State or any other Big 12 school. So, like to your point, everyone deserves credit here. But Mike Gundy deserves to point out some credit too along the way of who helped him get to the position he's in. This was not just all him. He had help along the way, which we all do. I'm not saying that's a negative thing, but I bring all that up to say Oklahoma State put Mike Gundy in a tremendous position to have the success that he did. So that's wanted to get that out there too, because it's been so long ago. People don't remember where he was before being the head coach of Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I would guess that Oklahoma State probably fast tracked Mike Gundy's career to becoming a head coach at the Power Five level. At that time, the Power Five level. You go back and look at a young Mike Gundy. He was charismatic. He was smart. He was innovative. I mean, the offenses that were being run around that time, like I think Mike Gundy would have made his way up from passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator somewhere. And I think eventually he would have become a head coach at the Power Five level because he was, I mean, again, he was young, he was hungry, he was charismatic, he was innovative, he was brilliant. I think he would have made his way up there, but I think it's fair to say that that was probably fast tracked by his connections at Oklahoma State. The fact that Les Miles was like, "Yes, I'm never leaving," and then sold his house the next day. Like, yes, the confluence of factors that came together for Mike to in 5 years go from the passing coordinator at Maryland to the head coach at Oklahoma State in what was at the time the best conference in the country. Yes, it was probably fast tracked by everything that happened, bringing him to Stillwater, and then the way things broke while he was here. So yeah, I still think that he would have gotten to the head coaching level at the Power Five, maybe not as fast, but yeah, a young Mike Gundy though he was a charismatic, smart guy. So I think he would have gotten to that level at some point.
I agree. We just don't know where or how that plays out, is why
Yeah,
I
there's
bring
no way
that
to
up.
know.
And he did a good job at Oklahoma State. The famous story of the Bedlam Rashawn Woods is still open game, 38-28.
Oh, great
The
game.
famous story is, when Mike was an offense coordinator, he was way more outspoken and gregarious than even when he became a head coach. And the famous story is he was walking past the media. I wasn't in the media at the time. This is just stories people have told that covered the game. They walked by all the media and said, I would have scored 50, more than 50 on him if Les let me call the plays.
That's
So
so.
he wanted to air it out as a young guy, especially compared to Les Miles. He wanted to air it out. So he did a really good job. And I think he was deserving at that point to be the head coach as far as his connections and the job he did at Oklahoma State as offensive coordinator. So I don't mean to demean him being picked as the coach, but they certainly helped him and put him in that position.
Oh yeah, I didn't take it that way at all. I just wanted to remind everybody that a young Mike Gundy was viewed very differently than we're viewing Mike Gundy right now after the worst run, of his career. A young Mike Gundy was viewed pretty favorably, I would imagine.
Let's talk Zach. And then I do want to answer questions, so fire them off. We'll get to as many as we can.
There's a couple
Um,
of ones already in here I want to get to, so I've scrolled back up and highlighted a couple. So don't if you've asked some, there are definitely some already that we're going to get to.
let's talk Zach, and then we'll start answering questions. Just your thoughts on Zach Robinson. I continue to hear that some of the detractors are like, well, he's never coached in college, and I'm like, well, Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh worked out okay coming from the NFL down to the college level. Uh, you think about lower level college coaches that have had success. You think about high school coaches, Gus Malzahn coming from high school. Like if you know ball, you know ball. I think calling plays for the Atlanta Falcons, you can call plays in the Big 12. So I dispel that notion right away. And again, there's mutual interest there. I reported that back in the spring. That hasn't changed. Zach does not want to be viewed as pushing Mike out. Uh, that's certainly not what he wants, and frankly doesn't need. He does a really good job in the NFL, and he's from that Sean McVay coaching tree that's so coveted by NFL teams. He might get offered an NFL head coaching job before he's offered the job at Oklahoma State, and that's something that we can't predict or don't know how it will play out. But there are personal reasons for Zach to take the job. There's financial. He only makes 500K as the offensive coordinator, which you and I have discussed. He is going to be the number one target by far. I can say that with 100% confidence. They're going to make him say no multiple times, probably before. And the thing that's exciting about Zach, besides all the obvious reasons, is he has a plan based on what I've been told. He has real plans for how to handle NIL, how to build a roster, how to garner support. I mean, having a coach that's that all in with all the donors and high paying officials and all the power brokers. That to me is perhaps the most exciting thing when you factor in everything he brings to the table otherwise.
Yeah, you mean a coach who's young, hungry, charismatic, innovative, one of those kind of guys? I would love one of those kind of guys. The only box he doesn't check is head coach. He hasn't been a head coach. That I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. It would be a 10 out of 10 absolute smash hire to go get Zach Robinson. Zach Robinson is absolutely one of the names that over the next 5 years will be on the short list for head coaching jobs in the NFL. He comes from the McVay tree. That is a big box to be checked. Sean McVay, people who don't follow the NFL as closely, he is a genius. Sean McVay is a football savant. He is a genius. It's not a coincidence that guys from his coaching tree go on and lead successful offenses in other places. Robinson came from the McVay tree. He's done a good job in Atlanta. Started to look like he was going to do a really good job last year, and then Kirk Cousins got hurt. His arm was about to fall off. He couldn't throw the ball. Last week, ran a good offense. Could have had a nice overtime win against the Bucs in week 1 if their kicker makes a 46 whatever yarder at the end of regulation to send it to overtime. But he did a good job last week, and his star is pointing upward for sure. And I think it would be the perfect fit for Oklahoma State. It's the easiest possible sell to a fan base that is so dejected right now, a fan base that feels like it's just been kicked in the teeth for the last 12 calendar months now. It's exactly what you need. Go back to where this fan base was prior to the start of the 2024 season and how good everyone felt with 21 starters coming back in the new look Big 12. We're going to run this new conference. The option, the ability, the opening to run this Big 12 conference, it's still there. No matter how far you've fallen, there are not juggernauts at the top of this conference that it's going to be impossible to overtake. Even the two schools that are throwing all the money around right now in BYU and Texas Tech, neither of those schools have proven that they can take all that money and turn it into success and wins on the field. Neither of those teams have proven that they have a guy at head coach who even has the resume and who would even be as sought after as a Zach Robinson. And again, then you start to draw the parallels between Mike Gundy. Mike Gundy finishes his career at Oklahoma State. He comes back 16 years later to be the head coach. Zach Robinson finishes his career at Oklahoma State, comes back 16, 17 years later to be the head coach at Oklahoma State. And it would be such an easy sell to the fan base of like, this is not, you go get Will Stein from Oregon. That was a name. I don't know if I saw it in a column. Maybe Haston threw it out. Maybe I saw it on Twitter. Somebody threw out Will Stein at Oregon. Will Stein would be a smash hire. He's a young, innovative offensive coach. People love Will Stein. And I'm sure that you would have a couple of great years with Will Stein. Will Stein's not sticking around for 10 years. He's not sticking around for 20 years. Will Stein's going to stick around, and if he smashes at Oklahoma State, he's getting the next job that comes open at one of the 10 biggest programs in the country, and those jobs come open more often than they should in modern college football because there's a dip. People
And
want
that's okay, though, because
yes.
that means you're winning.
And again, Will Stein would also be a smash hire. But I'm just saying, as far as a sell to the fan base of like, this is the new era, this is the next 20 years, Zach would be a smash.
Yeah. And that doesn't scare me about a Will Stein, because if he gets some big job, that means you're winning 10 plus games at Oklahoma State. You're not hiring the Oklahoma State coach who's won 7 or 8. So
yeah, if Ryan Day goes to the offense, to the NFL, pardon me, and Ohio State hires Will Stein to go be their head coach, I mean, the last guy that we lost to Ohio State was because we had the best defense in school history. So if things like that happen, like you said, yes, we are totally okay with coaches being so successful that they go somewhere else and then we have to try to replicate it.
yeah, you don't want to end up like Tulsa basketball. Other names that have been thrown out. Todd Monken, who again I think is more of an NFL guy than even Zach. I mean, he had a head coaching job in college and went to go be the quarterbacks coach in the NFL. That's how he was tired of college ball, it seemed at the time. Now imagine that now being where he is with the Ravens and trying to come back in the NIL era. I just don't see that happening. Jim Knowles, you mentioned it. He's 60 years old. Great coach. I mean, I certainly think he could be a quality head coach at Oklahoma State. But the name that was thrown out lately that I didn't really realize had an Oklahoma State connection was Alex Golish, the head coach at South Florida. He was a grad assistant at Oklahoma State for 1 year in 2008. So he actually would know Zach Robinson, which is kind of a wild thing to think about.
Coach Zach Robinson.
Yeah. Been at Toledo, then Illinois. He was Iowa State as their tight end slash run game coordinator 2016 to 2019. 1 season at UCF as the OC slash tight ends, followed Josh Heupel there for the same role. Now he's the head coach of South Florida, and he's already beaten Florida. But I didn't realize there was no issue, albeit 1 year. There's a connection there, and he is a hot name considering he just upset Florida. So those are kind of the candidates that have been on top of the list. But I think it starts and ends with Zach, and they go from there. But you want to do questions now because I think that
Yeah.
leads into the question of like who's making the hire with Chad Weiberg's
Well,
situation with the Board of Regents and
you
all
know,
that.
well, 1 second on that, because I do want to address a potential concern from Oklahoma State fans that Aiden brought up in the chat on YouTube. And he even prefaces it, says, not the same situation at all, but the push for Zach does remind me of bring Doug home in basketball. We dodged that bullet, thankfully, but I hope we are looking at all options and not just OSU related. Aiden, you even said it yourself off the top right there. Not the same situation at all. Zach is qualified. Doug would have been unqualified to run the program. Would he have had more success at Oklahoma State than he had in Green Bay? Would he have given up the radio show? Those are questions that we don't have the answer to because it didn't go that way. But the difference is just simply unqualified versus qualified. Doug Gottlieb, no coaching experience, no reason for Oklahoma State to hire him to be their head coach. Zach Robinson, highly sought after young offensive mind in the NFL, who I'm telling you, if he does not become the head coach at Oklahoma State, he will be a head coach in the NFL within 5 years. So I understand the want to make sure that we're just looking nationally to get the absolute best candidate. I'm just telling you, all things considered, I do think that guy is Zach.
Yeah, and when I first started hearing his name thrown around last spring when Gundy's contract thing was going on, I kind of rolled my eyes because people have wanted Brandon Whedon to be the offense coordinator for 10 years. I get it. You let your favorite former player come call plays, come be our coach. Like I get that sentiment, but I started to hear from people that would know that that's who they want to hire and there's mutual interest. And that changed my tune really quickly once I found that out. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, and also it would buy him some time being Zach Robinson versus hiring someone from out of the Oklahoma State family, so to speak. You know, taking over for Mike Gundy is not going to be easy. Filling the shoes of a Hall of Fame coach, we've seen it at many places over the years, is a very difficult proposition, and I think Zach would have more time and patience than an Alex Golish would. As soon as Alex Golish loses his first two Big 12 games, people are like, let's hire somebody else. So that's part of it. But first, we got to hear from Chris University Spirit before we get to the YouTube questions. Be sure to shop at chrisuniversityspirit.com. We appreciate Chris sponsoring the podcast as always. Get you a nifty polo like this or a t-shirt like Colby's got on. If you're watching on YouTube, appreciate Chris sponsoring the podcast as always. And also, the Pistols Firing Podcast is brought to you by the Brewster Consulting Group. Talk with our friends at the Brewster Consulting Group. They help build organizations that run like well-oiled machines with clear processes, reliable data, and reporting and technology that actually works for you. Their team of 6 Sigma Black Belts, PMP certified project managers, and seasoned data engineers have delivered solutions that are built to last for local clients like the Tulsa International Airport and Medify. They've also delivered solutions for large international enterprises like DP World. I know Colby likes the DP World Golf Tour, big tournament going on right now. I think Victor Hovland's in the lead, by the way, speaking of Oklahoma State. Even better, they're founded and ran by a proud OSU alum and season ticket holder. Learn more about them at brewsterconsulting.com or learn more about their methodologies by connecting with them as Brewster Consulting Group on LinkedIn or YouTube. Got a YouTube page. So we appreciate Brewster sponsoring the podcast as always. So without further ado, Colby, let's answer some questions.
Yeah, let's do it. By the way, Victor Hovland, one shot back of Hideki Matsuyama. So, yeah, good stuff at the BMW PGA Championship over across the pond. Alex Noren, just a couple shots back, too. So, that is the extent of our golf talk today. Today's not a golf pod, so we'll get back over here. Right off the top, Eric Jones, is Weiberg's job in danger? Also, what is a realistic timeline for Gundy to potentially resign? Carson, which one of those do we want to tackle first? The Weiberg question, is Weiberg's job in danger?
I haven't been able, I had really good intel on the whole Weiberg Gundy saga.
Last year.
I had it last spring, and I haven't been able to really confirm that or not. It's widely reported he doesn't have a contract. Kyle Ray at the Regents meeting mentioned that he doesn't have a contract and that they're going to be working on one when time allows, or it was very vague wording from him.
Let me read the quote because I thought the quote was kind of I thought the quote left the idea open for him to either be back or not be back. Here's what was said. His contract will be addressed in due time. He said, Chad is committed to our student athletes and our coaches, and our president is committed to Chad's energy and dedication to them. I think the contract will be addressed in due time. Today wasn't the right time, but when it's time to have that discussion, we'll have it. That told me either, yes, we are bringing him back, or no, he's not going to be brought back. He will not have another contract. That was a whole big nothing burger of a quote for me.
Haven't they had plenty of time? His contract ran out in June. That to me says his status is up in the air, which, reporting aside, I think would be a mistake based on everything I've heard that Chad's done behind the scenes. I mean, you had a head coach unwilling to make any changes, and he got him to reduce his contract, reduce his buyout, and hire a new staff. I think the notion is out there that Chad's weak or that he doesn't hold Gundy's feet to the fire like Mike Holder did. He just did that with a guy who had a contract that, to Chad's detriment, his fault really, him and Casey Shrum, he had a contract that rolled over year and had way too much power and no checks and balances. He somehow found a way to get Mike Gundy to change, and he wasn't willing to do that. People don't remember, like, how many weeks went by after the Colorado game had he not fired his coordinators? Like, if Mike Gundy was going to do that all along, what was the holdup? It took I think he fired them like the Wednesday before that Friday Board of Regents meeting as like a last ditch attempt to prove to those people that he'd be willing to make changes finally. That's what occurred. It's not me, in my opinion. That's what occurred. He wasn't going to fire anybody. He said, I'm the head coach. I got a contract and you can see me in court. And they said, okay, well, Chad Weiberg took that and went and gained the necessary leverage and got the green light from the Board of Regents, and we are here we are today. So it's a political game. I'm sure there's Board of Regents that want a new athletic director due to his close ties to Casey Shrum, who's no longer the president. Casey Shrum wanted Mike Gundy back, full stop. A lot of those Board of Regents did not. So I'm sure and Casey Shrum has a whole other set of issues as to why she's no longer the president as well. It's been widely reported on. So I think his ties to Casey Shrum and Mike Gundy have put his jobs. This is me just making inferences based on the information that's out there. That would be, I think, why he doesn't have a contract and why his job status is in question. But he's still the acting athletic director until further notice. And I think it would be a mistake to get rid of him. The name Ren Baker is being thrown around, the athletic director of West Virginia, which is a name I've heard before Chad was brought in. That's a name that I'd heard a lot about. Former OSU alum, has had a lot of success in that space, that area of expertise. He hasn't exactly lit it up as the West Virginia athletic director. He hired Darian DeVries, who was there 1 year in basketball, skirted town for Indiana, and he hired Rich Rodriguez, and that's not going well. You could argue that the alums hired Rich Rodriguez. Well, isn't that the same thing that Chad Weiberg's being criticized for? So all in all, I think his job status is in question, but I don't think it's over. But I don't have a good feel for it at this point, a good grasp or good intel rather.
Yeah, my opinion would be that it would be a mistake to let Chad go. It's hard for me to have as strong of an opinion about the athletic director as I do about, like, the football coaches, for example, because the football coaches, they have to put their product of their job performance on display for everyone to see 12 times a year. We all get to see how good are you at your job, how good are you at what you are doing right now this season. And it's pretty easy to watch that and to do some opinions from it. Even though we don't know everything that's happening behind closed doors, the job performance is on display. The job performance of an athletic director, that's a little bit different. A lot of what an athletic director is doing, probably the majority of what an athletic director is doing, is stuff that we don't know, stuff that we don't see, relationships that are taking place behind the scene that we're not aware of. So I think it would be a mistake to let Chad go. I think, we're just talking about football. David Taylor? Anybody? David Taylor. I mean, that's a big, big deal. Getting Chad Richardson in, reviving the Oklahoma State wrestling program, packing out Gallagher Arena for wrestling again, that's a big deal. Chad Weiberg was at the helm of that. Chad Weiberg was patient with Alan Bratton when he lost his whole roster and had to rebuild. And people are saying, what's wrong with the Oklahoma State golf program? Chad Weiberg was patient, knew he had the right guy in place. They just won a national championship. They're the favorites to win it this year. I understand football. Steve Lutz, that's to be determined what the success rate is there, but the recruiting's been good. We both like that hire a lot. We're willing to be patient and give that some time. I think Weiberg's done some good things as an athletic director. Obviously, the Oklahoma State football program has been a disaster for the past 12 months. I get that. You're the athletic director. That's happening under your watch. But I think that there are some things there that are out of Chad's control. You're dealing with a guy who's been the de facto king of Oklahoma State, the de facto king of Stillwater for the last 20 years. It's not that easy. You've got the rollover contract that you inherited, by the way, as an athletic director that's now gone, that your athletic director got rid of, like you said. I think it would be a little unfair to Chad Weiberg for him to be out. But again, I don't know what's happening with those relationships behind the scene. So if that happens, it is what it is. But yeah, I would say I would be in favor of Chad sticking around and being the guy to make this next hire and oversee what happens here, because I think he's been hungry and made a lot of right moves since he took over.
Yeah, and Chad Richardson has no formal affiliation with Oklahoma State and donated what he donated, like what, $12 million in that ballpark.
I don't know what the number was. I'm just going to say he donated a wrestling program.
Basically, yeah. And I think that's a good test case when people ask what is Oklahoma State capable of for football. We have a direct comparison with John Smith retiring. Chad Weiberg makes not only a great hire, a brilliant out of the box David Taylor didn't know he wanted to be the head coach of Oklahoma State until Chad Weiberg called. Like, that is a brilliant hire that has no program in the country in any sport has as much momentum as Oklahoma State wrestling. And Chad Weiberg deserves credit for that. When you're evaluating his job performance and the positives and negatives, that's a big tick. That's a big box ticked there. So I totally agree with you. And I think it would be a mistake to get rid of Chad. And hopefully that's not what's occurring. And that's before you get into who Chad Weiberg is and his family and what the connection they have to Oklahoma State. You couldn't have a more perfect person to lead your athletic department. Now that it's a very different time. I mean, I brought this up, gosh, months ago. When you look at what Oklahoma, the Sooners, have done in football in terms of turning it into an NFL organization, you look at Texas Tech, what they've all done with their NIL collective and their big money donor. He certainly makes a difference, Chad Campbell, and what he's done. But they seem to have their ducks in a row far greater than Oklahoma State in terms of how to attack NIL and how to have the structure and the organizational practices that they have in place. Oklahoma State's behind on that in terms of how it's all going to work. They got Kenyatta Wright handling it. They have, Mike Gundy and Chad Weiberg, but it's not nearly the shift we've seen from other schools in the country. That's a big question moving forward, no matter who the coach is or athletic director is there's a lot of dysfunction at Oklahoma State in terms of who's calling the shots. How is this going to look organizationally moving forward?
Yeah, and before we hit the second part of this two-parter, I should let you know that as Oregon and Northwestern head to halftime, Oregon's up 10-0. So just thought you might be interested in the 10-0 Oregon Northwestern score as they head into halftime. Doing about as well offensively.
They didn't have as much bulletin board material this week.
Didn't have as much bulletin board. It's a road game. We don't have to do transitive property stuff. I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit. But the other question Eric asked is realistic timeline for Gundy to resign. Carson, in a perfect world, absolutely perfect, I think we see how maybe like the next 3 weeks go. But I don't think it's crazy to think that the best thing for Mike Gundy would be to announce in season that his retirement is coming after the season. I think that if things continue to go poorly over the next several weeks, if you are clearly fielding one of the worst teams in the country and it's not going to get better, you're not going to be able to pull a 2023 and save your job. I think that would be the easiest way to dial back all of the vitriol that is coming his way, that will continue to come his way if things go the way they went last season, 0-9 in conference play and getting blown out and losing games by 30, 40, 50 points. If things continue to go that way, the vitriol is only going to get worse. The only way that you dial that back and have kind of somewhat of a happy ending despite the on-field performance being poor is if it's like, okay, let's appreciate Mike Gundy for everything he's done these last few weeks as he coaches this program before we turn it over. I don't know that happens. More realistic is probably a buyout negotiated after the season and you turn the page. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. Um, I do think that would serve a lot of areas, like you mentioned, the vitriol, and just really just an opportunity to show appreciation, knowing these are the last few home games, last few games in general of the Mike Gundy era, which is, span most kids in college span their entire life as Mike Gundy is the head coach.
I was 12 when he got hired. I was 12. I don't know anything.
Right.
I don't know anything.
And that gives Oklahoma State a real opportunity to go find a successor and jumpstart that process, because if you wait till the very end of the season, you lose a lot of top candidates, a lot of momentum. Now, Zach is certainly a unique candidate that they could reach out to really at any time, but I don't know. There's a lot of positive reasons for that. There's also some negative with like the players. This guy's not even my coach next year. Like maybe I should just enter the portal now and get a head start on that. I don't know. There's a lot of it's a very challenging question to answer. There's a lot of factors to consider there. So I do think ultimately, regardless of timing, that taking place before the end of the season would be a positive for Mike Gundy and OSU.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's is the last game of the season a home game or a road game? I want to look that up real quick.
I
Um,
believe it's home against Iowa State.
okay, if it's a home game, I mean that's even more reason. Even if it was just before the last game, because I probably if he announced that he was retiring, let's see here. Last game is home against Iowa State on Saturday, November 29th. If he announced that he was retiring that Monday at his press conference or something, or if they held a special press conference on that Wednesday, 3 days before the end of the season, I would bet you that there's 52,000 people in that stadium on Saturday to show their appreciation for 20 years.
I haven't had my microphone turned on. You
Have you
gotta you
really?
gotta help me out with this. It's
I,
been using my speakers.
okay, here's the problem is I wear this headset, so I think to me it comes through loud and clear, and then
I
maybe
should sound much better now.
listeners notice. But I mean, I guess I've got bad ears. I don't notice as much. I don't
It
notice as
it
much.
must have changed over when we hit live. I apologize to everyone who's
Well,
listening in audio form until whatever minute mark we're at now.
that was the thing too. Before we came live, you had said you turned it on, so I didn't think about
Yeah, well, the old strike again.
it.
Good question here from Kobe Toon. What's the ceiling on fundraising with Zach Robinson at the helm? The excitement and possibilities seem endless in that scenario. They are. They are endless. And I think, I'm still pretty gun shy on Oklahoma State's potential after what I've witnessed with basketball. I was saying for years Oklahoma State was the second best job in the Big 12 behind Kansas based on the arena, the crowd support, the history, all of those things. It just had massive potential in my eyes, and that's proven not to be the case. You can blame coaching hires, that's
Thunder,
fine, but the resume is what it is over the last 15, 20 years in basketball.
thunder.
Thunder certainly hurt, but
And
that said, like Oklahoma State is not poor. They certainly have a lot of big money boosters, and I don't think people. I don't think we're really going to know until there is a head coach that people want to open up the checkbook for, because Mike Gundy's been the head coach a very long time, and as I mentioned earlier, Chad Weiberg had to write into his contract doing caravans and fundraising and booster meetings, things like that. If you have a coach that's all in on that, regardless of who it is, and they win games, like who knows what Oklahoma State's potential is, because Oklahoma State is a super specific school in that if you went there and if you make $20,000 a year or you make $20 million a year, you are committed to Oklahoma State and you want Oklahoma State to succeed, and you certainly want them to succeed in football if you're an athletics fan. Maybe you're just a university fan. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is not a school that people come from all over the country, and like schools like Miami. They're private school. People come from all over the country to Miami. That's why their home games are very low attendance. They don't have that core base nearby that Oklahoma State does. And so who knows how many people have become $20 million a year earners in the last 5, 10 years that want to support Oklahoma State and can't stand Mike Gundy. We don't know that. We're not going to learn any of that till the time comes. But I am fairly positive that if they hire a new coach that is all in on those areas, that they will be very well funded. Now, can they fund a roster like Oregon? Probably not, but that's okay. Like Oregon now is up there with anybody, Alabama, you name them, Georgia, all the blue bloods. So that's not really what Oklahoma State needs. They probably need it to win a national championship, sure, but to win the Big 12, I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential there that's untapped.
Yeah, I think to win the Big 12, you probably need to be one of the top 5 to 8 spending teams in the country, and then just hope that your talent gels. Your coaches are better than other coaches. I mean, you're competing with right now this season. It would be like what we said earlier: BYU, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Utah. Oklahoma State can get back in the tier with those programs. Bill Haston reported earlier this week, like we talked about, there's an 8-figure donor ready to cut a check basically whenever Gundy's gone is what Haston reported. So there's money out there. There's money in the state of Oklahoma. How much of that makes its way to Stillwater? That's impossible for us to say. But I think the idea that Oklahoma State is this poor program that can't compete. I mean, maybe you can't compete with Oregon. I'll say that. Hand up. We can't compete financially with Oregon. Phil Knight is pumping money into that place. But we can compete with Iowa State. We can compete with Kansas State, with Utah, with BYU, Texas Tech, Arizona State, TCU, Baylor. Yeah, we can compete with those schools. I think that's totally reasonable. So, Carson, I don't want to forget our good friends at Wolf Corporation. If you're a Cowboy fan looking to sell or lease your commercial property, you can trust Wolf Corporation, Oklahoma's commercial real estate listing brokerage since 2010. Their experienced team specializes in showcasing your retail, office, or industrial space to the right buyers and tenants across the state. Based right here in Oklahoma, they deliver results with local expertise. Visit them at wolfcorporation.com. That's WULF corporation.com. Or call 405-308-3480. That's 405-308-3480 today. Go Pokes. I had one pulled up over here, another question. Did you have any more thoughts on that, Carson, while I find this other question that was a good one?
No, I mean, I think we answered that pretty well.
Okay.
How, again, I think regardless of who they hire, I still have questions of how it's all going to run. I do think there's a lot of dysfunction in the organization that is Oklahoma State, who's, the Board of Regents, the athletic director, and the now sitting president. I think there's a lot to sort out in terms of how are they going to handle NIL in football moving forward. I do think. Do you think Oklahoma State should hire like a GM, like a general manager, like NFL structure, and structure their football program like the NFL, or are they not to that level of an Oregon or an OU even in terms of NIL? I go back and forth on it. I do think that's the current structure, but it's weird to think about OU not having an athletic director right now, and they have a general manager that's going to be determining the fate of the football program, and they're going to hire an AD supposedly to run everything else. That's a weird setup to me. So I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on it.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question would be like, Kenyatta Wright's role. Is he the general manager, or is he like kind of just moving and shaking all of the sports and handling the contracts and stuff? I mean, I guess his role, like, is his title technically general manager?
I don't believe so.
I don't think his title is technically general manager. I guess my question would be like, is that essentially what he's already doing? But would you want to have someone who's doing that only football specific?
Director of football business is his
Director of
title.
football business. Okay. So he is football specific. I don't know. Hard question to know without knowing everything about Kenyatta Wright's role, what he's doing up there, and whether he'll be retained. My understanding is that he's also working without a contract, and that he could be sought after to potentially go somewhere else. If Zach is your guy who comes in, is he going to want somebody in that role, somebody he knows, somebody he trusts? Yeah, I don't have strong opinions about that. I'll be honest. It's weird, but I don't hate the idea of a general manager who runs the football program and someone else, an athletic director, who handles everything else. Because if you're an athletic director and you're being asked to run everything that's happening with football, and you also are responsible for women's soccer, which starts a couple of weeks before football, you're responsible for cross country, you're responsible for equestrian, you're responsible for everything else: baseball, softball, basketball, women's basketball, just everything across the board. That's a lot to do that, to then also be able to keep up with all of the new rules and regulations in college football, everything that's happening with these lawsuits, everything happening with NIL, recruiting. It's just, that's a big, 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 big job. So I almost think that an athletic director handling everything else, like that's a big job, but that's reasonable. That's what athletic directors do. And then I think it'd be just as big of a job for somebody to come in and just handle football. So the more I talk it out and the more I think about it, the more I kind of like those jobs being separate, because I think the football job is maybe too big of a job for somebody who's also needing to handle equestrian and cross country and be at those meets and go to the soccer games and be at the softball stadium. Like, I don't know. I think football might just be too big of a job to do all those things at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Grant Harper says Chad definitely needs to win at one of the two big profile sports. The small ones are awesome and well appreciated, but I think he'll get a win at football or basketball soon. He won a Fiesta Bowl with Mike. I mean, I guess he didn't hire Mike is the point there, which I could certainly understand. You know, he hired Steve Lutz, who we like. We'll have to see how that plays out, and we'll have to see how this plays out with Mike Gundy at the helm. So those are good points. What other questions we got in here?
There's a bigger college football philosophy question from Brian Teague right off the top earlier. It says, I know we all want college football change, commissioner, salary caps, contracts. Realistically, do you think it will ever happen, or is this just the product we'll get going forward? Do I think it will ever happen? Well, ever is a long time. So yes, I do think it will ever happen. Soon is a much tougher question, because there are things legally that I'm not qualified to understand, not qualified to comment on in terms of who can be employees, who can't be employees, what that means in terms of locking players down for 3 years. Like, is it legal even for you to say, okay, star quarterback who wants to come to Oklahoma State, 4-star Gatorade Texas Player of the Year, we're signing you to a 3-year, $5 million contract with a team option for the 4th year. Like, that stuff right now, I don't know the legality of that. So soon, I don't think so. Eventually, yes. For now, I think we're going to be stuck still a little bit in the Wild West with gradual tightenings of NIL restrictions, of actually having to do things to earn that NIL money. I think that there are a lot of Kawhi Leonards in college football right now who are getting a lot of no-show jobs from a lot of companies, and that's just legal in college football. That's not salary cap circumvention, because there is no salary cap. So ever is a long time. I think eventually we'll get to some things which will allow the competitive balance to become a bit more equalized. But right now, I think we're still going to be in the Wild West for a little while, and we're going to be paying to play.
No, I think that's accurate. Um, I'm trying to find this quote. Did you happen to see what um, Kendall Daniels said about the difference between playing at Oklahoma and Oklahoma State was in
I
practice?
I didn't see it, and I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know.
He said playing for Coach Brent Venables is like night and day. I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said like the intensity level at OU's practice with Brent Venables wasn't even comparable, and that Gundy, again, I'm paraphrasing, was present but like hands off, and they didn't really tackle much. It wasn't very intense, and basically that was the gist. And whether that's him saying that because now he's at OU, you can debate that, but I think you can look at the product on the field defensively for Oklahoma State, and that certainly bears out in terms of the physicality and the lack of like some of those highlights with Oregon looked like last year, where guys were kind of like guy caught a pass, they're kind of half pursuing lazily. It's just it. I think there's some real validity to what Kendall Daniels was saying there. And that's what Silent, I brought that up because Silent said, I think Gundy's almost completely hands off, doesn't call the players by their names, which we've heard for a few years, his whole tenure, really. I don't think the players would miss him at all. I would go that far, but I do think what Kendall Daniels said, I think you can see that on the product in the field. Now, OU has better defensive players still, but Kendall Daniels certainly looks like a different football player to me in terms of his effort level.
Yeah, and Brent Venables, for whatever I've said on about him on this podcast as a head coach and where I think some of his shortcomings were in his first few seasons at Oklahoma, I mean, it's been well known for 25 years that he's one of the best defensive minds in college football. So it doesn't shock me at all that Kendall would go down there and say, whoa, this is different. I mean, yeah, that's why the results are there for Brent Venables. That's why the results have been there for decades for Brent Venables on that side of the ball. That's why Clemson was winning national titles with Brent. What one of the reasons Clemson was winning national titles whenever Brent Venables was there, and now they're barely sneaking past Troy last week, and they're getting beat by Georgia Tech right now at halftime. So yeah, Brent Venables is an awesome defensive coach, and could be growing into his role as a head coach. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that Kendall Daniels had good things to say about Brent Venables, because Kendall Daniels, he went through a lot at Oklahoma State. He was a really talented guy coming out, and I mean, 2 years with Brian Nardo, and then you go down to Brent Venables. Like, I mean, I didn't mean to start dumping on Brian Nardo today, but you don't think there's a difference in practicing for Brian Nardo and practicing for Brent Venables? There's a difference. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, coaching matters. Coaching matters.
Joel Pinfield, who is on your hot board for football, the football hire, if it's not Zach. We mentioned some of the names that have been reported out there. And I think you bring up a good point. I think it leads to this answer here. You brought up Will Stein at Oregon. That's the type of, if it's not Zach, that's the type of hire to make. A guy who's at a big time program with an innovative offense or defense. I think, again, I think like we discussed off the top, like Oklahoma State has to succeed with offense first and foremost. So I think the next hire should be an offensive mind. Um, Will Stein, Ben Arbuckle's name's getting thrown around the offensive coordinator at OU. That'd be interesting if they hired OU's OC. But that type of hire that has had success at a high level and can bring with him innovation, creativity, and play calling. That you completely modernize this offense because their offense right now, you brought it up, is a relic. It is so easy to defend. There's no motion. There's no downfield passing to speak of, and it's
The
just
middle of
super
the field. Where's the middle of the field, Carson?
doesn't exist.
Have we forgotten about it? Where is the middle of the football field?
Doesn't exist. But like those types of names, I mean, a Will Stein, a Ben Arbuckle. Ben Arbuckle's only done it for 3 games. We'll see how he finishes the year. But you know what I'm saying. That type of hire would be all over my lists. What about you?
Yeah, I'd go Zach Robinson 1, Will Stein 2, and the guy who I'm putting at 3. I want your thoughts. I have mixed thoughts about who I'm putting at 3, but he seems like such an offensive savant that, like, let's go for it. 59, 60-year-old hire to be your head coach as you're kicking a 59, 60-year-old guy out the door. I get it. Todd Monken's a wizard, man. Todd Monken is a wizard. And if we're just like, hey, let me go to that stadium and watch points be scored. I've sat through some snoozers in that stadium these past few years. Just, do you know what I would give for a 45-42 loss right now, Carson? A loss. But make it 45-42.
We were tired of those at
I
one
mean,
point, but yeah, bring them back. Now we look like Iowa,
I mean, how
Um,
ungrateful were we whenever only the defense was bad? How ungrateful were we to be losing games to Texas Tech, 56-52? Man, those games were fun. But yeah, I mean,
well,
how do you feel about Todd Monken? He's older, but he's obviously a wizard. He's had the absolute highest level of success offensively everywhere he's been for 15, 20 years.
his resume speaks for itself, and on that surface, yeah, he would be definitely in my top of the names. But I don't think you're factoring in, and people don't factor in these are people, and that him and Mike Gundy are like best friends. That's the reason he even became the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State in the first place. I don't think he wants to take over his best friend's job that he had for 21 years. And
Fair.
that's before you get into the fact he left a head coaching job to go coach quarterbacks. Not even an offensive coordinator. He took a quarterbacks coaching job in the NFL to get away from the college game. So for me, now maybe he would be interested like Zach. I didn't think Zach would be, and he clearly is based on the people I've spoken with. So maybe he would be interested. And I think they would call him to gauge his interest. I do. He's very well liked in Stillwater, has the makings of a head coach. I loved hearing him talk when he was the OC. We would run to him with microphones and cameras. Munkin's here, go, 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 go. And he talked smack to OU before Bedlam, that week of Bedlam. He was awesome. So I would love to have him, but I just can't see it based on all the factors I mentioned.
Yeah, I don't think Todd Monken is going to be the next head coach at Oklahoma State. The idea is there. He was your OC. He's a great mind. I assume he'd get a big raise to come to Oklahoma State, even though I'm sure he's probably the best paid offensive coordinator in the NFL. You said Zach's probably making $500,000 down in Atlanta. I mean, surely Monken's making $2 million in Baltimore to lead the best NFL.
He just got a big raise after last. He's getting 2 million per year, which If OSU called them and say, "Hey, we'll pay you 7," you'd have to think about it. I don't care who you
Yeah.
are or what you want to do.
And if I'm
Like,
mistaken,
I'll go coach college for $7 million.
yeah,
Monken
true.
would have to consider that.
If you're Oklahoma State, you probably want to get your next guy at 4 or 5, right? Save a little bit there, little bit less on the head coach, a little bit more on the NIL. I mean,
Yeah,
does that come for 4? I think Zach here at 4 would be great.
yeah, I think that would serve Oklahoma State, and that when people start saying, "Well, who can OSU get?" I don't think they could get a good coach, or who would even be interested. Every coach who doesn't have a top of the crop head coaching job in college or a top of the crop OC job where they can be choosy, like a Will Stein can be choosy. He may not want to coach Oklahoma State, but if you sit down a contract in front of him that says $5 million, I don't care what he wants to do. These coaches care about money. And your list expands when you're willing to pay 4, 5, 6, 7, $8 million per year. That's life-changing money that any coach will consider, depending on what current job they have. So I'm not too worried about who can Oklahoma State get. They've paid their coaches very well for a very long time, Mike Gundy included, on down to his staff. So that takes care of a lot of, well, how good of a job is OSU? Can you recruit? They don't care. Every head coach or potential head coach thinks they can win and win big wherever they go. So if you pay them, they'll come.
Yeah, I mean, Kellen Moore just took the New Orleans Saints head coaching job, knowing that he was going to be having Spencer Rattler as his starting quarterback.
Yeah, the worst roster in the league. I
By
mean,
a lot. By a lot. Oh, and also just for any NFL fans, they're screwed for like 3 or 4 or 5 years in cap hell without draft picks. He went and took the job. People will come take the job.
yeah,
Coaches,
Matt Rule taking the Panthers job in the
yes.
state it was in. I'm like, why would he go there? And then I distinctly remember I was on vacation. I went to like a resort in Cancun with my wife. And I was walking around. I could see some people that clearly had a lot of money. And it was right after he had taken that job. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's why he took the Panthers job. So he could be like that guy over there making $9 million a year as the Panthers head coach. And if it doesn't work out, you get fired and you got a huge buyout from the Panthers. He's set. Like it doesn't matter what he does moving forward. That's why the Panthers need to pay him that to get him. And OSU will have to pay up to get a quality head coach, but they can do that for 4, 5, $6 million.
By the way, speaking of Matt Rule, you know he has a podcast, right?
No.
He's the head coach of Nebraska. He actively has a podcast. You want to know what it's called?
Huskers Husking blog
Oh, no, it's way
podcast.
more fun than that. It's called House Rules.
Spelled like his last name. That's good. That's good.
100%. Not bad. Not a bad pun.
That might be why he's not winning. He's too focused on podcasting.
There's a basketball coach, I think, a college basketball coach who does a radio show who's been struggling too, winning some games. But maybe coaching and doing shows is not is not the way to go. One more here that I see from Grant Harper on YouTube. What do the teams in the Big 12 have to do to be able to recruit with the SEC and Big 10? Seems impossible, but just curious. You had me. It seems impossible, Grant. The reality is it's money. It's money, but we don't have as much of it. Oh, the schools in the Big 12 don't have as much of it. And even whenever you do have that money, when contracts are close, when I say contracts, when money is close and a 5-star has to decide, am I going to go play for Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, or Texas Tech? I mean, which of those schools are putting more guys in the NFL? When money's close, they're still going to those other places because those other places are still putting more guys in the NFL. So, yeah, as things are currently situated, recruiting at the level of the big boys in the Big Ten and the SEC is not in the cards. You have to recruit the best that you can and then hope that your coaching can elevate your roster to be able to compete with those teams. Arizona State nearly beat Texas last year in a college football playoff game. Underdog wins do happen. You have to hope that your coaches and just the right combination of talent is good enough for you in 1 year. And look, this isn't the best of 7. It's a single elimination tournament. If you can get in, you got to beat somebody on one Saturday. We nearly saw it with Scattaboo and those guys. It can happen. But yeah, as far as beating those teams in recruiting rankings, not going to happen.
No, and I think let's narrow the focus if you're Oklahoma State to competing in the Big 12. Like you got to start worrying about Kansas and the money that David Booth guy is pumping into that program. You got to worry about Texas Tech and Cody Campbell and their resources that they've got rolling in addition to their structure is rolling as well. Like let's worry about that first and foremost. Let's worry about competing in the Big 12 and win that conference and then go worry about how do we get to the next level. Like we're several levels below that right now at Oklahoma State. And I do think there's a path here where Oklahoma State doesn't need to have a $40 million NIL roster to compete nationally. You've already started to see it a little bit under Mike Gundy with recruiting. You can recruit high school football players at a much higher level now because they every school across the board isn't, especially the blue bloods, aren't recruiting them like they were in the past. They're not signing 25 to 30 player classes. And we've already seen the improvements in recruiting for Oklahoma State in state with Kenyatta Wright. That's the path forward is really hone in on your high school recruiting in Texas and Oklahoma where their families can come watch you play. They're way more apt to stay at your school and play longer and not just play 1 year and bounce like some of the NIL guys you'll sign. There's a real strategy and path for Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 with added NIL funding. I'm not saying they can just survive without NIL funding. I'm not saying that. Combine those two things with more funding, with really sharp recruiting in state and in Texas, and you can absolutely compete. And we don't know what the money situation will shake out with NIL and a new head coach, but there's a path there in terms of getting really good football players that are willing to stay.
Yeah, I love your point about recruiting high school and about how there are more options available there because the schools that I just rattled off, Ohio State, Oregon, Miami, schools like that, they're bringing in a bunch of guys out of the portal because they don't have time. They have money. So they can bring in the biggest names out of the portal and just absolutely microwave a team overnight, and they're good to go. They can just reload with talent that they've seen in other places across the country. So, yeah, your high school recruiting. And the reality is, you're going to get some of those guys in. You might develop one of those guys for 2 years. His third year, he absolutely pops. And then his fourth year, he's playing for Ohio State. But if that happens, it is what it is. Go out and get a bunch of really talented high school guys and develop them and hope that they stick around because you're the one who gave them their shot and you can do enough NIL to keep them here. And like you said, at this point, after a 69-3 loss last week to Oregon, we are so far away as a fan base from needing to think about winning a national championship. We need to focus on this conference. I think everyone watching right now, you and I, most of this fan base would be over the moon, jumping for joy. It's the middle of winter. Let's celebrate by going and jumping in Lake Hefner if this team won the Big 12 championship game, even if it meant a 4-touchdown loss 3 weeks later to Ohio State in the playoff. If that's what you're telling me the scenario is, I'm signing on the dotted line today.
Yep, that's where the focus needs to be. Got time for a few more questions. I wanted to pull something up here in a minute, but you can go ahead and find another one.
Sure. Dallas Cowboys question from Pokes 93. What are my thoughts after week one? One CD drop away from winning at the Eagles. 3 CD drops away. You can't trust a Sooner. You know how it is. But optimistic. I mean, look, they're not a Super Bowl contender. That's pretty obvious. Jerry doesn't want to win a Super Bowl. Jerry wants to be relevant. Jerry wants to make money. That's why Jerry Jones traded the best pass rusher in the league. You never win the trade whenever you trade away a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time, to do what he does. And look what he's doing in Green Bay through 2 weeks. And now they're one of the Super Bowl favorites. So Jerry's not serious about winning a Super Bowl, but that doesn't mean that this can't be a fun team this year. I think Dak looked great coming back off injury. The offense is going to be fun. They've got 2 really nice receivers. Offensive line looked certainly good enough. Jalen Carter spitting on Dak and getting ejected certainly helped that. But yeah, I think that this could be a fun team that plays a lot of 30-27, 34-31 type games, and those are really high scoring in the NFL and will be a lot of fun. So as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I'm resigned to the fact that they're not going to really win anything significant, but they can still be a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sorry, I wasn't really listening. I'm trying to find this photo from
You're
way
good.
back
You're good.
when.
What are you trying to find?
I don't want to spoil the surprise, but
Okay. Okay.
someone like Brian Teague, was that who asked me that? Uh,
Brian Teague was asking about Zach's plan. If you could shed any
Yeah,
light
yeah,
on
yeah. That's
Zach's play, is
uh,
that the one?
Brian Teague says you mentioned on the other show Zach already planned ready to go. Can you shed any light on that? I mean, while I don't have like specifics on, you know, the dollars and figures, the inner workings of structure as how he wants to formulate NIL and pay for players and recruit and things of that nature. He just has the ear of a lot of really, really high paying, influential people in Stillwater. And because we all know Zach, we all love Zach. He was a great player, first and foremost, or a great person, first and foremost, and a great player. And if you've met Zach once, he's just one of those guys you meet that you just like instantly. And that goes so far in this. And look, he has family connections there still in Stillwater. And so he's not just been gone for 20 years and doesn't know his way around. He does. And here's the specifics I'll get into. He had spoken with, like, when there was mutual interest, like high highly important people were talking to him, and he was talking to them as well. And he articulated that he would, as you say, crush as the head coach, and he would need their support. He's already kind of laid a foundation of garnering support. I'll put it that way. If the time comes, again, he does not want to be viewed as pushing Mike out the door. It's not what he's got his hands full right now coaching the Falcons. They just called him in the offseason, and he was honest and said he would be interested if that situation came. But I'm not pushing Mike out the door. You guys need to figure out what's going on there before you come to me with talking in realistic terms about this job. And they worked it out with Mike Gundy, and he's gone back to coaching the Falcons. But that's the long and short of it, Colby, is that he has a lot of support already, and he knows the right phone numbers to call to get even more, and he will get it. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, young, hungry, charismatic, innovative. People like him. I mean, yeah, it would be an absolute smash. Question here from Dylan James. I've been trying not to completely panic on the Cowboys season going 2-10, but if we struggle against Tulsa, does that call for absolute panic? I think most people are kind of already pretty panicked. Yes, if you struggle against Tulsa, that calls for panic. We don't know how long Haas Haney's going to be back. We don't know if he's going to play again this season. If you get 4 or 5 games from Haas at the end of the season, how different do things look there? I don't know. I've hesitated to hit the 3-9 sounder over the last couple of weeks because there are still some unknowns and there are still some bad teams on Oklahoma State's schedule. Tulsa's a bad football team. They have been for years. I don't know that Arizona, Houston, or Cincinnati are going to be totally unbeatable. You know, Arizona and Houston won last night, but Kansas State, they look, I mean, like you said, John Kurtz is doing a rock bottom Kansas State podcast right now as we're doing this one. So, yeah, there's some bad teams still left on Oklahoma State's schedule. So I'm not hitting the 3-9 sounder just yet, but give me a few weeks. Give me a few weeks. We might fire it off.
Well, I do think the power brokers that be at OSU right now, they do want to see if this was an Oregon thing when OSU plays Tulsa, or is this an OSU thing
Yeah.
about getting just completely embarrassed on a national stage. So I do think they're letting it play out, and they're going to see what's what. They're going to see how the next few weeks go, like you've talked about so much, and that's where they're going to go from here.
Looking, there was one other that I wanted to get to. Yeah, I lost it. I lost it. Oh, because it was on Twitter. I'm looking on YouTube. It was on Twitter. Khalil Oatmeal asks, where will Mike coach if he gets fired after the season? And you can't say nowhere. You can't say he's just going to go do TV. So basically, I mean, I'm looking at this from the perspective of like, what is the market for Mike Gundy if Oklahoma State decides to move on? Carson, I can't imagine it's a real hot market for an older coach who seems to be struggling in the modern era of college football. I I would guess it's not Power Four. One level down from the Power Four, maybe in the MAC, something like that. I don't know. Does he want to leave Stillwater and go do that somewhere else? I know you told me I can't say nowhere. That would be my real answer is he's going to go do TV. But if not, I think, I don't know, Missouri State type of place like that. I mean, is he willing to do that? Like that would just, I don't know. But I
Oh,
cannot.
I think Mike could get a really good job. I mean, look at his
You think he
track
could?
record. It just
Think he
depends if
could?
he wants, like you said, like I would predict he goes and does TV. That's what Bill Hastings talked so much about, and Bill's got really good sources.
Power four,
But he could
power
certainly
four.
go get a power four job somewhere that wants a head coach.
You think? I don't know, man. If you're a power four program and you bring in a nearly 60-year-old Mike Gundy who's put this on tape the last couple of years, I don't know. I think that's a tough hire to make.
He was in the Big 12 title game in 2023. Like
I know.
there's metrics there
I know.
that are very easy to support the hiring of Mike Gundy. I mean, think of how many retread coaches get hired every year in college.
You're right. You're right. Somebody on the live stream, I don't have it pulled up right now at that spot, but somebody said John Gruden's available if we want to go get John Gruden. You know what? I think I'll pass. I think I'll pass on bringing John Gruden in.
That name when it gets thrown out, groomers, they called them groomers instead of rumors when Tennessee wanted to hire him. All the groomers that were coming around. I don't think John Gruden's very interested in coaching. He's on Barstool now. And I do think Mike's probably talked to his brother Kale, who's on the Sports Animal Weekly. He's probably talked to Bob Stoops about his TV path, and what they've probably told him is like, "This is great. I don't need stress of recruiting. I get an off season. It's fun. I still have kind of my toe in the football water, and I'm sure he's gotten positive reviews of doing TV. So that's fully what I expect him to do. And I think he'd be great. I mean, his resume on TV is already out there from what he's been able to do while the head coach at Oklahoma State. And I think he'd be fantastic at it.
I agree. He will be a legend on TV. I think whether that's at ESPN, whether that's locally doing radio, I think he's probably too big to locally be doing radio. It gives more ESPN vibes to me. I don't see him as like a color commentator on games, but like a studio show, yeah, I think he would crush it at that.
All right, fine. Let's wrap it up with this. You good?
I'm good. Yeah, real quick, just random thought that popped into my head. Maybe he takes Corso's spot. 25 years of Mike Gundy sitting out there putting on headgear.
Well, Saban's already there. I think
Yeah, true.
they already have their established head coach.
Yeah, true. Saban's like 15 years older than Gundy, though, isn't he?
Yeah, he's up there.
Nick Saban's
Um,
73, so I think he's exactly 15 years older than Mike Gundy.
so once upon a time, this was back in 2016, September 1st, so right at, 9 years ago. The Pistols Firing podcast did a live event down in Dallas. Myself, Kyle Porter, and who does the like what I can't remember the brewery at Oklahoma. I can't the name just escaped me, but they sponsored our old sponsor. God, name I'm drawing a blank
I
here,
don't want
but
to say a name and be wrong, so I'm not going
no,
to throw
yeah.
it.
But anyway, we did a live show, and guess who the guest was? Can
You
you
got
see my
something for me
screen?
here? Hey, looky there.
One Zach Robinson for
Look
for
at
our
that
audio listeners.
superstar.
He was doing like high school quarterback, like private coaching at this point, before his coaching career had gone on. Ryder Cup hat too, timely there, Colby, on
Yeah,
Zach.
sick.
But I'd bring that up because man, that would be pretty pretty poetic for Zach to be the head coach at Oklahoma State. I recalled that live show, and it'd be pretty awesome if Zach came back to be the head coach at Oklahoma State. That'd be kind of a full circle moment for me. He was awesome on that live show we did, and just again, good guy. Mike Gundy is still the head coach. That needs to be said to reiterate. We'll see how this season plays out, but um, it's going to be an interesting season, and I think I would be over the moon if Zach ultimately decided to leave the NFL and come be the head coach if Mike does call it quits. So
Yeah.
it would be awesome.
That was a cool picture of y'all there with Zach, and that to me means that we're for sure getting him on if and when he does get hired, since y'all have that pre-existing relationship. So
Yeah, that would be that'd be fun to have the
that'd
head
be a lot of
coach on
fun.
the show.
That'd be a lot of
You know,
fun.
someone commented about Mike Holder criticizing Mike Gundy's recruiting. That happened on this podcast,
Mhm.
and when we did that show, I remember it ending, and Kyle and I thought it went really well, and then we started to the quotes were like starting to pop up on the internet. They popped up like in the Oklahoma, and then next thing you know, it's on Pardon the Interruption in their first segment about
Amazing.
athletic director criticizing recruiting by his head coach. I'm like, oh no. And the odds of getting Mike Holder on this show are probably 0.0% now, which is
Oh yeah.
sad because Mike was just answering the questions he knew how to answer them. I think he was just
Yep.
being open and honest. But anyway, I got to get out of here. Appreciate you joining me, Colby. Appreciate everyone, all our live questions and everything. And Colby, we're on to Tulsa next Friday, another weeknight game. We'll see how the stadium looks, but been fun. Appreciate you joining me.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate everyone. JD, we didn't get to your question. We'll get to that another time. But yeah, for all of you who've stuck with us for nearly 2 hours now, we appreciate it. We love all the listeners. We love our great sponsors. Go support them. And everyone have a great weekend. Enjoy a whole lot of football. And we'll be back next week to preview Tulsa. Thanks for watching and listening. As always, go Pokes.